Welcome back inside the Raiders Training Camp podcast presented by SiriusXM. I'm your host, Vince Sapienza, coming to you from the Intermountain Health Performance Center here at Raiders HQ. Training camp is alive, open, and underway, and it is going well. That, according to Raiders head coach Pete Carroll, 3 practices in the can, one better than the next. Now, the biggest news, obviously, this past week, the Raiders releasing Christian Wilkins. However, that opens the door and presents the opportunity for that next man up mentality early on in training camp for the Silver and Black. And as we look as to what has taken place in what is being called the acclimation period for the Raiders training camp in this early on without pads, we have seen a, quote, spunky rotation group of defensive linemen. Pete Carroll's words, not mine. When we're talking about the likes of an Adam Butler who's leading the way in that position group, when we talk about Tyree Wilson getting reps on the inside as well as the outside of the defensive line, Jonah Laulu continues to be the hot name here at training camp, and we can't forget about the likes of a Zach Butler or Aleki Fotu playing that nose tackle position. So when we look about what the Raiders will look like at that defensive line group moving forward in 2025, still a lot to unfold. Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, and Patrick Graham talking about this is still the learning process. They are in the information gathering business at this present moment, specifically to that defensive line as well as the team as a whole. But as good and as promising as the defensive line is, the resumes and the veteran leadership that is taking place at the linebacker position, and again, the competition that's going on in the secondary, a lot of the talk this training camp has been about the offense. And you can't start anywhere with this Raiders team than Geno Smith himself. When he was acquired from Seattle, there was an obvious excitement that was brought between the reunion of Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. That was obvious, but now we're seeing it in real time. And it doesn't take a genius, or not genius like myself, to watch practice and see that he has helped raise the floor of that quarterback room for the Raiders. Some of the plays he has made has just not been there for a couple years for the Raiders, whether it's with his arm or with his legs. And we have seen that early and in large quantities in practice between he and Aiden O'Connell, who has shown very well early in training camp as well. But Geno Smith and Chip Kelly, that cohesion, that comfort is starting to blossom pretty early for the Silver and Black. And that is obviously good news in terms of getting the vernacular down, getting the scheme down of what Chip Kelly is trying to do. You know, everybody talks about Chip Kelly and the creativity that he provides and, you know, this flashy type of offense, which is all true. We saw it in college and we saw it for a little bit in the NFL. But everyone who we've talked to this week, players-wise, when asked about Chip Kelly's offense, says it starts with toughness and physicality, and it starts up front. Now, obviously, with no pads, it's impossible to see how that offensive line is doing. I wish I could tell you how the offensive line looks against that defensive line, 1v1s, 1v2s, early on in training camp. But Pete Carroll himself said we can't even really judge it until the pads go on. So I'm going to park that aside for just a minute. But when we look at the guys on the offense being on the same page, Geno Smith categorized it as smooth at this point in this quote-unquote acclimation period, which is great because you can't ask for anything better. You don't want clunky. You don't want missed assignments. It's been a smooth transition early on. The Raiders offense and the defense in particular, but coaches have talked about this early part of training camp is really a process, an extended process from the offseason program, from OTAs, from minicamp, making sure everybody came back, is on the same page. They were in their playbook, they were looking at film, and they were in the best shape of their lives. Pete Carroll checked all those boxes when asked how the players have looked early on. Those are all good things. Good things we like to hear in training camp. But with Geno Smith, and you talk about, okay, he's doing well. Well, what do the weapons look like? Our eyes quickly go to Ashton Jeanty, right? The 6th overall pick in this past draft. What does he look like? And again, without pads, pretty tough to tell how it is running the ball. But the compliments are pouring in over his natural pass-catching ability. This was a guy who played wide receiver in high school. And his junior year at Boise State, he caught the ball a ton. It wasn't until this past season at Boise State where all they did was run the ball. They didn't pass it to him because, frankly, he didn't need to. He wasn't even playing in the second half of most seasons. So when you're hearing these early reports and coaches are praising the pass-catching ability of an Ashton Jeanty, which is, something he's obviously good at, but not even his claim to fame, which is running the ball. That's an exciting time for Raider Nation and the Silver Black as a whole. Brock Bowers looks like the juggernaut that he showed and proved to be his rookie season in year one as a tight end. Already one of, if not the best, tight ends in the National Football League. Every time he's out on the field, you can't cover him. He's always open, and he's always making the catch. Geno Smith said this week, I love throwing to Brock Bowers. In fact, I feel bad when I don't throw to Brock Bowers because of how good he is, how hard he works, and quite honestly, how open he usually is most of the time. Now, again, I keep prefacing, the pads are not in place, so we're all taking this with a grain of salt, but there has been a beautiful balance, I would call it, of offense and defense going back and forth. Each have had their moments, but early on, which is normal, the offense has gotten the best of the defense because the defense is seeing a bunch of things new for the first time. So for the offense, they've been, if I had to judge it, who's winning early on in training camp, I'd probably lean the offense, but there's been some good moments on both sides of the ball. And that's what you want to hear, right? You want to hear that there's a nice balance of power. Now, if you're on offense, you want to be winning every rep. You want to be competing and winning every rep. Same goes for the defense. But Pete Carroll, who called the third day of training camp the best day by far, is happy with what he's seen. And if Pete's happy, then the rest of Raider Nation should be happy as well. When we talk about the wide receiver rotation, it's been an interesting mix. Jacoby Myers has been there. Obviously, Trey Tucker's there. Dante Thornton running with the ones as well. And we've seen Alex Bachman, Jack Besh, all kind of getting in the mix. And it's a young wide receiver group that the ceiling, the potential is limitless, I guess you would say at this point, because of chip scheme, because of the higher quarterback floor that you have with Geno Smith, that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for these guys to eat. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for these guys to do and excel at what they do best. So that's what's exciting about that. We had James Jones on the first episode of the Raiders Training Camp podcast, and he talked about if he was out there, he'd want to go attack, and he'd want to test not only the secondary, which is a young group in itself, but the receivers as well. See how much they were able to indulge and to ingest and then to basically put out on the field as well. So we talked to James Jones, a former Raiders receiver, but now it's time to turn our attention to the new wave, to the future of the Raiders wide receiver room, and that is rookie Jack Besh. Joining us now here on the Raiders Training Camp podcast presented by SiriusXM is Raiders rookie receiver Jack Besh. Jack, we're going to get into training camp and the 3 days that you guys have had, but talk to me about this offseason in general, the whirlwind that it is going from the college game into the National Football League. How are you feeling? Have you settled in quite yet?
Man, I feel great. OTAs, everything is obviously a learning curve, but, OTAs coming up here, trying to get the playbook under your belt. It's a lot, coming in here, trying to learn these plays each and every day, studying a whole lot. So now training camp coming, I feel much better with the offense. I feel like I have a much better grasp on it. I told myself before I started this, first I just want to thank God for everything he's given me, for all the opportunities and the blessings he's put in front of me each and every day. For my brother, being on my shoulders, being the best guardian angel I could ever ask for, and being out there with that field on me each and every day. But training camp has been great. Just finished up our first 3-day block. Playing for Coach Carroll, my receiver coach, all the guys out here. It's been truly amazing. There's a bunch of energy out here. I can't wait to just keep going, to keep pressing forward and see what we can do this season.
Jack, you've talked obviously and been very open about your late older brother Tiger and how you're a 2-for-1 special right here coming to Las Vegas. So how does that fuel you, whether it's the offseason, whether it's a training camp practice, an OTA, a film session, whatever it may be?
It fuels me every day. This wasn't just my dream. Like you said, it was kind of a 2-for-1 special deal. It was our dream, my brother's dream and my dream to be doing this. And now I know in a weird, special way that we both get to live it out. Now he gets to be with me out on that field each and every day, in the meeting rooms, in the weight room, whatever I'm doing, he's with me always. So not only does he get to watch from the sideline, but he gets to play the game with me now. So it truly has been amazing. It's been great. I truly am blessed, knowing that he's in heaven with our Almighty Lord, I couldn't be more thankful for all the opportunities and blessings, like I said earlier, that have been put in front of me. And I just can't wait to keep taking advantage of everyone throwing my way.
So, Jack, we're 3 days into training camp now in terms of practice. Pete Carroll's calling this the acclimation period ahead of you guys putting on pads. I'm curious, the acclimation period feels like a bridge from the OTAs and the offseason program into this training camp. So how has it been walking that bridge into training camp?
Yeah, I think the coaches talk about it's all about being a pro. It's knowing, what to do and when to do it. Obviously we don't have pads on, so we're not out here killing each other. But, the defense is fitting us up. They're getting in position to play the ball. We're out there running full speed routes. O-line getting the proper fits. But we're not going full speed to the ground. Obviously going back to that, just being a pro, understanding how to practice. And I think this team does a great job with that. And I think it starts with the coaches.
I don't want to get cliche with the welcome to the NFL type moment question, but what has been the biggest moment, I guess, for lack of a better term, in terms of realizing the biggest difference between the college game and the professional game?
Not only is everybody good out here physically, but everybody's super smart. I think you have to find different ways to get open and separate yourself. Because, in the college level, you can kind of separate yourself physically. You can kind of be bigger, stronger, faster than guys. But now you got to really use your mind. And I think that's going to be an advantage for me, just being able to use my mind. And, obviously, like I said, it takes time to be able to learn, how everything works, to be able to learn all the defenses that you're going to play and how to recognize the coverages. Each and every day it's a stepping stone to get where you want to go. But it truly has, like I said, been amazing with the help of our coaches. But, yeah, I would definitely say not only is everybody physically gifted, everybody's super smart up top.
And Ashton Jeanty, your fellow rookie, talked about how one of the things he noticed was just the detail, right? Whether it's Chip Kelly's playbook or just the verbiage or whatever it may be in the film room. So when you talk about this being a process and learning the film, the playbook, how difficult has that been? How big of a process has that been for you as you transition in and not just taking it in, but then applying it to out on the field?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I think it's a learning curve for everybody. It's a phrase people use. You get in what you put in is what you get out. I think if you study, if you're always in the playbook, if you're always watching film, try and understand, what to do, when to do it. Like he said, the attention to detail is definitely a great point. It's definitely something different from college. In the NFL, there's different landmarks you get to get open, whether that's zone, beating man, pressing leverages, whatever it may be. So just being able to learn all that, like you said, the more you're in the playbook, the more you're watching film, the more you're studying, the quicker you're going to be able to grasp it. But each and every day, coming out here and actually getting in between those white lines, it's great to be out here just because you get to learn so much each and every day, not only when you're on the field, but then, again, looking back on the film so you can come out the next day, not make the same mistake, and just play that little bit faster each and every day.
It's a pretty young wide receiver room, obviously, but who have you been leaning on, whether it's in the receiver room or just the team in general, in terms of the veterans, again, as you acclimate during this period of training camp?
Yeah, I think we have a great room, like you said. Obviously, it's a pretty young room, but we do have vets in there. Obviously, Coab and Trey, they know the game super well. They know the offense super well. So being able to just ask them questions about what they see, about the playbook, they're always open. They're always just trying to give us as much knowledge as possible. And we're truly thankful to have that, because that's not like that everywhere. So to be able to have these two vets that, are able to just give us so much information, but want to give us so much information, I think that's the what separates them. I would really say those two guys.
So, we've been getting little breadcrumbs here and there during training camp from some of your teammates about this. I don't want to call it famous now, but just this kind of a legendary pre-training camp team meeting that Pete Carroll had. Everyone was fired up, laughing, ready to run through a brick wall before you guys hit the field. Can you let us in on what that experience was like? You don't have to give us all the details, but what that experience like, and what these team meetings are with a coach like Pete Carroll, the legendary resume and everything that goes with it.
It's easy. Coach Carroll's electric. He brings the energy. And anybody who you talk to about Coach Carroll, one of the main things they say every time is he brings the energy. He's electric. Whenever he's up there talking, everybody's eyes are on him and everybody's locked in. And he knows how to fire us up. Like you said, he knows how to get us to want to run through a wall. But the thing is about him, he knows how to teach controlled chaos, how to be all amped up and fired up, but at the same time being able to have that control over yourself to put all that energy in the right direction so we can all get to the right place.
Safe to say we're ready for pads?
Safe to say we're ready for pads, baby. Let's go.
That is Raiders rookie wide receiver Jack Besh joining us here on the Raiders Training Camp podcast. Jack, best of luck the rest of the way. Can't look forward to chatting with you down the road.
Thank you. God bless.
Now, the next time we chat, the Raiders will have pads on at training camp, and we will bring you all the action here on the Raiders Training Camp podcast presented by SiriusXM. Make sure you go anywhere you find your podcast to download this one, as well as Raiders.com and YouTube. I'm Vince Sapienza. We'll talk to you next week.